tuned in to Watch This with Eryk and Brandon, the show where we make a friend watch a movie or TV show they've never seen before. What do they think? Is their opinion the same as yours? That is what we find out. And on today's episode, Brandon and I are going to be discussing the first TV show that we've covered on our show here, Downton Abbey. And I've seen every episode of this show. I love this show. Brandon, I don't think would have ever thought to even start watching this show, which is why I chose it. He's a first-time viewer. We watched episode 1 of season 1. We'll discuss the plot, our favorite scenes, and get our reactions to this show.
And spoiler alert, we do talk about the show, the plot, and everything in between. So if you haven't seen it, go and watch it, and then come back to us. We'll break it all down for you.
Exactly. Play along at home.
And we're going to get into the background right away. So Downton Abbey is a British TV series. It was set in the 20th century, early 20th century, and it's created by a guy named Julian Fellowes. He's an actor, writer, director, screenwriter. He's done it all. He's done everything. And the series first aired on ITV in the UK back in 2010, which is a free-to-air TV channel. And it was on PBS in Canada and the US. And it follows the life of the Crawley family and their servants, and it covers a bunch of events in history, major events in history that affect their lives and the British social hierarchy altogether. The show won a bunch of awards. They got a Golden Globe for Best Miniseries or TV Film, and a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Miniseries or a Movie. And this is pretty cool, too. It's in the Guinness World Records, too. It's the most critically acclaimed English language TV series of 2011.
I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so that's pretty, like, to be in the Guinness Book of World Records alone, it's quite an honor. And the show earned the most nominations of any international TV series in the history of the Primetime Emmy Awards. And it's got 27 in total after just 2 series. And they're going to make a movie out of it, too. It's a continuation of the show. That was confirmed last summer. Yeah. So that's going to continue on. Again, I don't know what happens in the end of the series, so we'll have to wait and see. We'll watch for that.
Well, it's very exciting news for me because I've seen every episode. I can't wait to watch more. And, I mean, just hearing all the background on this, I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, I didn't do any research before I started watching the show. It was on Netflix.
It was there, yeah.
Put it on and just got hooked. And so to learn about all this, all the awards and everything is pretty incredible and not shocking at all because I think the show is great. So we watched episode 1 of season 1 and just to kind of cover the plot of that episode. And, you know, it's amazing. The episode was, what, an hour, maybe an hour and a half for the first episode. I can't remember how long it was, but It was, you know, a little bit longer maybe than a typical TV series, and they crammed a lot into just one episode. So here's what happened. Episode 1, set in April of 1912. News of the sinking RMS Titanic has threatened the future of Downton Abbey, the stately manor, which is run by Robert Crawley, the Earl of Grantham. Lord Grantham's cousin, James Crawley, and his son Patrick were killed on the Titanic disaster, both heirs to the earldom. I love that I get to say the word earldom. Lord Grantham makes the decision to find another suitable heir. Lord Grantham hires a new valet as well in this episode, John Bates, or Mr. Bates, as they call him in this show. He actually served as a batman in the military. He was, because Lord Crawley was an officer in the military, and John Bates was his batman. And when I say batman, I don't mean Batman.
Not the superhero.
The superhero. That's just a position in the military from way back in the day when these rich folks would become officers in the military. They would have a personal servant. And so that's what John Bates was. And now he's been hired as the valet for Lord Crawley at Downton Abbey. The family is visited as well in this episode by the Duke of Crowborough. That's a tough one to pronounce. They believe he is interested in marrying Lady Mary, but when he learns of Lord Grantham's decision to find a new heir and not break the entail that would give Lady Grantham's fortune to Lady Mary, he loses interest. However, it is revealed that he had had a previous romantic relationship with Thomas Barrow, who was a footman at Downton, so maybe he wasn't interested at all.
Yes.
And even in the money. So anyway, a lot happens.
So yeah, that's the plot of episode 1 alone.
Just
so that's
episode
a lot.
1.
And I've got some questions to ask about the general, overall, everything to do with the show. So is the entire series based on finding the heir to the family fortune, or is it just something in season 1 that's going to focus on? Or can you do that? Can you get into that without spoiling too much, I guess?
That's kind of the main idea of season 1, I would say, without spoiling anything, and you'll see what happens. We're going to be watching the rest of the series here, but yeah, no, it probably pops up again here and there throughout the series, just to keep things interesting. But this is certainly where they start here. This is certainly a main plot point of season 1.
Okay, and you mentioned the heir to the fortune who died on the Titanic. Now, it's revealed that that's Lady Mary's cousin.
Right.
And they're set to get married.
Right.
Is that something that's common in 1912? Is that...
What's the question? It must have been.
I guess.
Maybe amongst rich people.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I warned you about before we watched Downton Abbey is they're going to be saying things about their cousins. And you're going to go, what?
Yeah, kind of turn your head and think, what's going on?
This is what
here?
I was talking about.
Okay.
A lot of cousin talk, a lot of cousin marrying talk. You'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one last question. At the very end of episode 1, you see the guy, and he says that our lives are about to change. Who's that guy?
Well, I can't reveal who that guy is because you are going to find out in episode 2. But this does relate to what I was talking about just a moment ago about Lord Grantham trying to find the heir to Downton Abbey and everything.
Okay.
It relates to that. You'll find out his identity in episode 2.
And my prediction for this, my initial prediction is that it was a show focusing on 2 different classes of people living together in a castle. Basically, rich people and their servants whose lives intertwine, and there's scandalous results. That's my basic prediction of the show.
You pretty much nailed it. You pretty much nailed it. I mean, at the end of the day, that is basically what it's about. And then so many things happen.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff that develops, right? Okay, so my reaction as a first-time viewer. Now, the way we do a show, I try to go into everything we watch with an open mind.
Right.
For this one, I didn't really know what to expect heading into it. I'd say, personally, I'm not a fan of British television in general.
Oh, just in general?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I wouldn't have watched it had it not been for this podcast, I don't think. And I mean, that being said, after watching just the first episode, we watched it together, and I turned to you and I said, well, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to know what happened. It's one of those shows where you have to see what happens next.
Yep.
You know, who's going to be the heir to the fortune? What will happen with the Duke and Thomas? Yep. The role Bates will play.
Right.
Because, I mean, he had a huge role, it seemed, in the whole episode. It really focused it on him. And it did a really good job of not answering any of those questions.
Yeah.
That, you know, it leaves you wanting more. And it's got a way of pulling you in and wanting those answers.
Talk about cliffhangers.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
they nailed it.
And I like how they tie in real life events and how they impact the lives of the characters in the show. The sinking of the Titanic being the first event they cover. And another thing that really stood out to me was the acting. We've watched a few movies now, and the acting could be questionable in some of them. I mean, some of them was great acting, but
sure.
the actors in Downton Abbey are the real deal. So,
incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, the cast is really amazing. And especially when you consider how many characters there are.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, like you said, in your prediction, which you pretty much got right. I mean, it's the wealthy family that is the heirs to this massive castle who own this castle, and then the people who work for them. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we kind of get to know them all. And they all have to have moments throughout the 6 seasons where they're the focus. And so they all have to kind of carry their weight, and they do, which is really, really amazing. I thought it was funny that you said you didn't really like British series. Have you really watched much?
Well, I have on and off. I mean, like Monty Python and stuff. I'm not a big fan of that kind of stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's not a series, but I mean, it's a movie.
It was.
I guess.
But it's a comedy. And so that doesn't really appeal to you. But you haven't really watched British drama at all?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't know why.
No, fair enough. I mean, one thing I will say is, if you like the acting in this, it just seems to me that British series and everything always have much better acting.
It has better acting.
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe it's just British actors have better training. That's probably a huge generalization, but that's just what it seems to me. It almost seems like all of these people have come from theater backgrounds and are very well trained. And it just, I don't know, they just nail it every time. And so I love watching British series. So that was actually one of the reasons why I started watching this show in the first place, is because I watch a lot of British shows. Mostly they are crime procedurals, like police procedurals and things like that. So I don't watch a lot of period pieces from Britain, but I started watching this one. I absolutely loved it, and we watched the first episode. It's the first time I've rewatched the first episode as somebody who has seen the whole series, and I was very interested to watch episode 1 again because I wanted to see how things changed and if things changed as much.
Because you pick up more things than once you watch it again, right? For the second time around or third time around, however many times you've watched it.
I've watched it once.
Okay.
I'm not crazy, but I do love the show. One thing I want to mention right off the top, you mentioned Julian Fellows was the creator of the show. Very talented guy. The writing in this show is incredible. And you mentioned it with the cliffhangers and how it just leaves you wanting more. I mean, really, really incredible. And my first impression was similar to yours. I'd heard of the show, heard it was critically acclaimed. Unlike you, I did have interest in watching. I think you probably would have skipped past it on your Netflix every time.
Yeah.
Never would have even considered it.
And I mean, I've heard my parents watched it,
Right.
my family's watched it, and they've said that it's a great show. But
Sure.
again, not my
Not your
wheelhouse.
cup of tea.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And now I was hooked right away. And one thing that stood out, rewatching episode 1 for the first time, is how the characters were already developed. Now, this was really amazing to me because I find with most shows, when you watch the quote-unquote pilot episode, you can see an actor working it out. Right? Like
They're trying to figure out their role.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
They're trying to figure out the character, and they're trying to figure out who these people are, how they're going to talk. Are they going to do something that they're going to keep doing? Like, even if you watch The Godfather, for example, like you see Michael Corleone, he sits in the chair and he crosses his legs and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, that's the iconic image of Michael Corleone that you see in the following movies.
Right.
Right? And so I was looking for things like that. Are these people working out their characters? No.
They're already there. They're them.
There.
Yeah.
And that is amazing to me. I think that has a lot to do with Julian Fellows being an actor and also a writer and a producer on the show. I think he made sure that this was all sorted before we got into episode 1.
He had a game plan.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. He wanted to make sure these people know who they are because they're going to be playing these roles for however many years. And, I want these people to be set already. I want episode 1 to set the tone. So I think he probably had a big part in that, and really amazing to me that everybody was so locked in right away. And speaking of pilot episodes, which is kind of what this is. I mean, they don't really call it a pilot. I think this was more episode 1. And that's another thing, too. Because it's not really a traditional pilot, I think they wanted to make sure everybody was right on point and locked in for episode 1. But one thing they do in a lot of pilots that's almost a cliche in a way is they kind of introduce a new character to shake up, the group
Ruffle
of people.
the feathers.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly, right? That's just like a cliche move for pilots, and they do that in Downton Abbey episode 1, right? Mr. Bates is the new character who shows up. He's going to be the valet to the Earl of Grantham, and nobody really gives him a warm welcome.
Yeah, he's got an injury. He's got a
Right.
cane. He limps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the other workers at the house, the other servants, they're all saying like, "Well, this guy's not useful," right? Thomas Barrow, he really wanted that position, and he had been filling in for the previous valet after he left, and so he's like, they picked a guy with a bum leg.
What are they thinking?
Right, exactly. And so nobody really gives him a warm reception, and they did it so brilliantly. I mean, it's such a cliche thing, but the way he affects everybody is just incredible. I mean, usually they just kind of shoehorn in a new character in a typical show, but this one was done so exceptionally good. I mean, he interacts with the rich people, right? And even they're talking behind his back, except for the Earl of Grantham, who
is his friend? Well, friends,
his
I guess.
friend,
Yeah.
and, he was he had worked with him in the military, so he knew him, and he was trying to give him a chance. But everybody's talking behind his back and saying, get rid of this guy. I mean, he can't do his job correctly and everything. And it's just amazing how he could touch so many people and have so many interactions with so many different characters in one episode. The writing is incredible.
And he knows that everybody's talking behind his back, too.
Right.
That's another thing. I mean, they are talking behind his back, but, sometimes people wouldn't know that they are, and he knows.
He's totally aware of everybody's feeling about him, and he acts very stoic when they kind of decide to ultimately send him away. Even though we then see him breaking down in his room. He
doesn't want to go.
He doesn't want to go, but he acts very stoic. He kind of expected that this would be the reaction to him, but he was going to show up and do his job anyway. And then so, at the end when he comes back, I mean, it really makes for an amazing moment. But that it's such a cliche thing, and they did it so well in this show. And so, I mean, that right away, that might have been the thing that kind of ultimately clinched it for me when I started watching this show, however many years ago it was, because I just thought, okay, this show clearly is on another level.
They know what they're doing.
When it comes to writing. Exactly. They know what they're doing. And so for a show that's kind of soap opera-esque, if you will, it really is well made. And anyway, rewatching episode 1, that was my reaction. I'm very happy to see that it was so well done, and as well done as I remembered.
All right, so we're going to get to favorite scenes now. We'll break it down like this. And the way they set up the whole atmosphere of the castle was really well done. At the beginning of the episode, they showed everybody working. They showed the lower class. They showed the upper class. You're seeing the rich people mostly carefree. The servants scrambling around. They're trying to make sure everything is perfect. Right? And the food setting the tables basically running around and all that chaos. So.
Oh, yeah. No, it's unbelievable. Because, they are running. Right? And they're scrambling and, they're yelling at each other. Make sure you get that over there and all this kind of stuff. Meanwhile, the rich folks are just sitting in their bed.
All la-di-da, waiting for breakfast in bed.
Just waiting for them to do their job. And it really does a beautiful job of setting up the dichotomy between these two people, these two groups of people. One is just, we are the owners of this place, and you are the workers.
You are here to serve us.
You are here to serve us, and they do an incredible job of setting that up.
And what about characters and performance? We mentioned before the acting of the show, it's tops. There was a bunch of characters that have something about them that leaves you wanting more. Bates was one that really stood out to me. We talked about him earlier. And there seems to be something about him I feel is going to have a lot to do with the plot going forward.
Yes. I mean, as I mentioned, they do a great job of setting up how he interacts with everybody else and how he's going to affect everybody else. And I feel like there was a lot that actor needed to do in this episode, and he did it very, very well. And what an incredible character. And I'm telling you, his story arc throughout the series is pretty incredible. I don't know if you'll be surprised, but it really is amazing. That's well done. And I just want to mention one of my favorite scenes is at the very end, and I sort of touched on it when I was talking about my reaction to the show, when they are going to send him away and say, okay, you know what, maybe you can't work here. And they put him in the car, and then Lord Grantham runs up to the car and just whips the door open and drags him out, basically.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere. That was a pretty amazing scene, an incredible way to sort of tie up that episode. And, he is a character that is going to have a big impact over the 6 seasons.
And everyone likes an underdog. He's got the cane. He can't keep up with the rest of the servants. He doesn't let it affect him, though. He just keeps on going. And I thought that was a really good job how they did that.
Now, my favorite character is the Dowager Countess. She is incredible. She doesn't really do much in this episode. We just see her in a couple of scenes, and she's kind of arguing with people in this episode. But she is hilarious. Like, one of the things I like about this show is there is humor in there. I mean, another tribute to the writing of this show. It's dramatic, and at times it is kind of soap opera-ish, right? Where it's like overly dramatic, and they're having.
But then they have the comic relief, right?
But then they have funny lines, like legitimately witty and funny lines. And she is a hilarious character. You didn't really get to see that.
Yeah, there wasn't too much of her, but I remember you had mentioned her right off the top. As soon as she came on the screen, you were like, "That's the Countess." What is it again?
Dowager Countess.
Dowager Countess. That's right. So I'm looking forward to see what she has to.
Yes,
do.
She is hilarious and very, very, very good. And plays a bigger role than she did in the first episode throughout this the series. I think they realized once season 1 kind of got underway, and they realized people kind of gravitated towards her, and she's very funny and everything. I think they gave her a bigger role because of that.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, I think you'll enjoy her as well because she's very, very good.
So that's season 1 of episode 1 of Downton Abbey, and we're gonna watch the rest of the series. What do we got next week?
Well, next week we're going to have completed season 1 of the show, and we're going to just do a deep dive into it. Some of the plot arches throughout the season, and then, of course, your ultimate reaction to it. I mean, what did you think of the series now that you've seen an entire season of it? And will you continue watching?
Well, that's the question.
That's the big question.
That's what intrigues me the most, because I don't know. I mean, after watching the first episode, yes, I do want to know what happens. Will I want to watch 5 more seasons?
Yeah. And a movie?
We'll see. And the movie.
When that comes out?
We'll see. So.
You know what? before we started, this is what I said. I made this prediction. I said, even if you hate this show, you will at the very least say, well, I want to know what happens. Because the writing is that good. So, and that's basically what happened. Right? I mean, I don't know if you hate the show.
No, I don't hate it. No, by all means, no.
But you do want to see what happens.
But I want to see what happens, absolutely.
So we'll watch what happens next. And that's what we're going to be talking about the rest of season 1 of Downton Abbey on next week's edition of Watch This. I am Eryk. He is Brandon. Thanks to Joe, Lucas, and Shelby, our producers. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.